Yesterday, a prominent analyst on the Horn of Africa claimed that fighting in Tigray had intensified and there was dire need of immediate international intervention in Tigray as humanitarian crisis was deepening in Tigray. Several viewers asked this question that what's your take on this claim that fighting in Tigray has intensified over the past few days? Firstly, viewers, we haven't heard any official statement from either Ethiopian National Defence Forces, Eritrean forces, or Tigray Defence Forces about fighting intensifying in Tigray. ENDF and Eritrean forces, they have not been issuing any statements about Tigray war. They say that war is over. TDF spokespersons have also been largely silent over the past few days. They haven't said a word as well. Then how come these analysts are saying that fighting in Tigray has intensified? We can rely on the reports of humanitarian organizations, viewers, which are working on ground in Tigray, and they are spread across Tigray region. What are they saying? What are their reports saying about fighting in Tigray? I thought of having a look at two maps published by UNOCHA, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Activities in Tigray. UNOCHA published first map in March, viewers. The second map was published just a few days ago, almost 4 days ago, viewers. And the two maps show the areas in Tigray which are accessible to humanitarian organizations, relief organizations working in Tigray. Comparison of these two maps tells a lot about ongoing fighting in Tigray. Have a look at the two maps, viewers. This map was published by UNOCHA in March, viewers. And this map shows how much of Tigray was accessible to relief organizations in March. There are three colored areas in this map, viewers. Dark pink colored areas were totally inaccessible. Light pink colored areas were partially accessible. And white colored areas were totally accessible in March, viewers. You can clearly see in this map, viewers, that in March, much of Tigray was inaccessible. Northwestern Tigray, Central Tigray, Northern Tigray, Tigray-Eritrea border, Southern Tigray, Tigray-Amhara border, they are dark pink colored. So they were inaccessible in March. Why were they inaccessible? Because fighting was going on in these areas in March. I reported in several videos in March and April about ongoing fighting in these areas. So when we say that an area is inaccessible, it's partly due to the fact that fighting is going on there. In March, you can see that Western Tigray was accessible. Western Tigray, Humera, etc. Have been under the control of ENDF and Eritrean forces. That is why Western Tigray was accessible. Then some areas on a far Tigray border, they were also light pink colored. They were also partially accessible. Humera was also partially accessible, viewers. Now look at the second map, viewers. This map has been published by UNOCHA just a few days ago, I think 3 or 4 days ago. This map shows the on-ground situation in terms of accessibility in Tigray, viewers. You can clearly see in this map, viewers, that now much of Tigray is partially accessible. Dark pink colored areas they have decreased, viewers, and light pink colored areas they have increased. You can see that almost entire Western Tigray and most of areas in northwestern Tigray, they have become accessible. Same is the case with Tigray-Eritrea border areas, Afar Tigray border areas, and in southern Tigray You can see that now Tigray is much more accessible in comparison with Tigray in March viewers. Can this be an indication that fighting in Tigray has subsided? Viewers, when we were reporting about fighting in Tigray in March, we were reporting from several areas. We were receiving reports about fighting in northwestern Tigray, in central Tigray, in Tigray, Eritrea border areas. But for the past few weeks, we haven't seen fighting, heavy fighting in southern Tigray, in Tigray Afar border areas, in Tigray Eritrea border areas. That is why I personally see these maps as very accurate. An area is accessible if there is no fighting viewers. If heavy fighting is going on, it's almost impossible to gain access to these areas. Viewers, comparison of the two maps clearly shows that fighting in Tigray has subsided. It is not intensifying as is being claimed by some analysts and some supporters of TDF. On ground situation tells us that intensity of fighting in Tigray is declining. It's partly because of guerrilla warfare strategy adopted by Tigray Defence Forces. And most of these guerrilla type attacks are small scale attacks which are not reported, which cannot be reported. So the intensity of large scale fighting has decreased viewers. Small scale fighting is still underway. And lastly, it does not mean viewers, again I'm saying that TPLF is and TDF are out of this war, that they have been crushed. No, it does not mean that Ethiopian National Defence Forces, Eritrean forces are in full control of Tigray. No, they are not. Central Tigray, parts of northwestern Tigray and parts of southern Tigray, they are still seeing some fighting views. This lull in fighting is due to increased pressure from Eritrean and ENDF forces on Tigray Defence Forces. Tigray Defence Forces have gone into typical guerrilla warfare mode. That is why intensity of large scale fighting has decreased to some extent in Tigray viewers. Thank you for watching.